Welcome to the Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. In this episode, I kick off with an interview with Duncan Fulton, Chief Corporate Officer for Restaurant Brands, Inc., better known as Tim Hortons, Burger King, and Popeyes. Recorded live in a busy media room at the Restaurant Canada trade show in early March, Duncan takes us through the strategy, culture, driving 27,000 restaurants in 110 countries with a new restaurant opening every 7 hours, and how to figure out the right pace of change in any organization. Next, Carl Boutet, Chief Strategist for Studio RX, recorded from his office in Montreal. We catch up after missing each other in January at the NRF Big Show and talk about his visit to Asia and China earlier in the year, observations from his tour, and lessons learned that we can apply to our situation today, dealing with COVID-19 and how the Chinese are pulling themselves out of the crisis. But first, let's jump right into my conversation with Duncan from RBI. All right, Duncan, welcome to the Voice of Retail. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Well, we met in one of your past lives when I was Retail Council of Canada and you were at Canadian Tire and Sport Chek, so it's great to see you again.
It was good fun.
Always looking for the low-profile jobs that that don't offer many challenges. You've got a real thing on your hands with RBI. For the folks at home that are listening, unpack for us a little bit about your personal professional journey and a little bit about RBI, because I'm not sure people understand some of the great parts that it is.
Sure. So my quick background that ended me at RBI, I spent the first 9 years of my career working in politics. Worked for Premier Frank McKenna in New Brunswick. Actually worked for Frank so much, I ended up dropping out of university to spend all of my time working for Frank because I was learning so much at such a young age. Then I worked in Ontario, then I worked in Ottawa in politics, worked for the Prime Minister for several years. Then after 9 years in government, realized I really didn't understand the private sector.
Right.
So I went to agency for 6 years. And in agency, it exposed me to dozens of companies in a number of different industries. And then by 2009, got headhunted to go join Canadian Tire. Joined them, became part of the acquisition team there when we did the acquisition of the Fresani Group, which became FGL Sports, which is Sport Chek. At that point, I became the Chief Marketing Officer for FGL and also for the Marks brands. I had never done the marketing side before, so that was amazing.
There's such a great team of professionals at Canadian Tire and at FGL.
Oh, amazing!
In place,
amazing.
Right? The first-class marketing team.
And then became president of FGL. And then I met the folks at Restaurant Brands. So RBI is 27,000 restaurants in 110 countries. Burger King, Popeyes, and Tim Hortons. We are currently opening a new restaurant every 7 hours somewhere on the planet.
Every 7 hours, 7 days a week.
7 days a week, every 7 hours, we're opening a new restaurant.
Wow.
Last year we opened, I'm going to say net, because you're always closing a few, so let's be honest about it.
Sure.
Net, we opened about 1,400 restaurants last year.
Yeah.
On our current trajectory, which we'd like to speed up, we will be at 40,000 restaurants within 8 to 10 years, and that will put us as one of the couple biggest restaurant companies on the planet.
How do you, at that pace, keep and establish a culture? That's a tremendous pace, one every 7 hours. How do you put in place a culture that keeps that pace up and keeps the quality and all the things that...
I got to tell you, one of the big reasons that I joined RBI is the culture blows me away. So RBI owns these brands that have 30, 40, 50 years of heritage. RBI is a startup. It didn't exist before December 2014.
Right.
So folks that own Burger King bought Tim's and then IPO'd a new company called RBI. So RBI is 5 years old. And as we look at it today, there was almost an RBI 1.0, which is kind of call it 2015 to 2018, 2018, early 2019. We're now into RBI 2.0. we had an amazing CEO guide the company kind of through the Burger King years and into the Tim's years. A new CEO who's been with Burger King for 20 plus years as an operator named Jose Sil became our CEO in January of 19. Everything about our culture is about an ownership mindset. We only have 1,250 people globally, 1,250 people supporting 27,000 restaurants. And that means culturally, we're not a bank. We don't have 100,000 people.
Right.
We're not kind of stuck with the culture we have. We can spin the culture on a dime if we want to. And on top of that, we really ascribe to an ownership mentality where you come in, we keep our teams tight, so you're given a ton of accountability. You're given extremely clear outcomes. The people that deliver the outcomes and do it in the right way are rewarded with equity in the company. And we have a number of other programs that make it easy for you to buy into the company. So where a lot of companies say, oh, we want you to act like an owner, but they don't treat you like an owner. If you look at the top 10% of our company, let's call it those top 125 people, the top 10% of our company has an average age of about 39.
Wow, young, right?
And that group would all have each kind of 7 figures of equity, if not more, in the company. So there's material ownership in the company. So what does that mean? That means that when you're sitting around choosing priorities, you only focus on the things that matter. It doesn't matter who got the parking spot. It doesn't matter who was on the to line versus the CC line on the email. These are things, it doesn't matter who gets the office, because we don't have offices. We all work at the same tables side by side. Companies that can't provide an ownership culture, suddenly all those other things matter because they're status symbols. In our company, all that matters is doing a great job, delivering on outcomes, being a hardworking, good person. And we have a lot of true owners in the company that really focus on what matters to drive the business.
And what's your role in all this? You're Chief Corporate Officer. What does that mean on a day-to-day, month-to-month basis? Obviously, strategy and growth strategy.
Yeah, look, it's a vague enough title that lets me play in a lot of different things. So listen, the company had never, again, as part of a startup, like most startups, in the early days, you focus on driving business, getting clients, building a sustainable business model. So the company never spent any time telling its own story, making sure that all the different audiences that care about you, governments, investors, suppliers, franchisees, there wasn't a ton of attention in the early days on telling our story to all those audiences. The focus was just put your head down, do a good job, the numbers will speak for themselves, all is good. But like with any company as it matures, we come to the conclusion it's easier to attract top talent. It's easier to build meaningful, long-standing relationships with the people that matter most if they understand what you're up to and they understand how you're thinking. So we've spent a lot of time explaining that to folks, including doing our first Investor Day last year. Part of my attraction for joining the company was to play with all 3 brands globally. I'm also spending a large majority of my time at Tim's right now and spending a lot of time on the road with franchisees, digging deep into a lot of the operational metrics of how we serve franchisees, and attracting some great talent to join Tim Hortons. So it's been a lot of fun.
Well, Tim Hortons is such a great brand in this country, and it's been in the news. Recently talked about need to do a little bit better than they did in the past. What are you hearing from the franchisees, and what are the plans for the Tim Hortons brand that get you excited about the potential?
Yeah, look, we've really spent some considerable effort in the last 18 months to build some very strong relationships with our franchisees. Again, it's a very grassroots distributed model where we have 1,500 small business owners that own 4,000 restaurants across the country. So it's always complex to manage the information that gets to 1,500 individuals on a daily basis. So I spent a lot of time building the routines so that they can get that feedback as to what we're up to. they gave us the feedback that for a year or two there, we added too much complexity to the business. We typically would do 25 limited time offers in a year, like what you would expect. You got a pumpkin spice in the fall, you got a candy cane at Christmas, you got a smile cookie in the spring. Then we went from 25 to 35. 2 years ago we did 40. Last year we did 60 limited time offers. And we added a lot of complexity to the restaurants, and we caused some chaos in the system. Even just take it down to a part-time employee comes in for your shift, and there's 6 new things on the menu that you got to figure out in the 5 minutes before your shift starts.
And there's a long line of cars waiting to get served, so you want to have great customer service.
And I think Canadians looked at Tim's and said, you guys are trying some stuff that's kind of on the edges that you're not known for. Franchisees said that. And look, there's always going to be opportunities to expand and grow core categories. But we said, listen, we need to be the absolute undisputed best at breakfast, at baked goods, at coffee. And we have a few things we can do to be better. So take coffee. We are among the last to move to new technology brewing. We're still being using glass pots. We've never changed our blend of beans since 1964. Like 1 out of every 2 people I meet, they go, why did you let your competitor take your beans? Never happened, okay? Which is fake news. But we've had the same great blend of beans. Others sped up their efforts on packaging, on marketing, on advertising, on water filtration, on brewing technology. And we were late versus some of our competitors on that. So that's why you're seeing us do a lot of that very quickly now. We have to provide the best cup of coffee, the best donut, the best breakfast in the country, hands down. And we are doing that with a big focus this year. And then we can continue to expand from the core.
I see that, food service and restaurants and retail share a lot in common, and tremendous disruption in the space from home delivery perspective and from finding the right people and talent. How do you look at those elements of the business? Recently in the news, Panera was in the news talking about an all-you-can-drink coffee program. That clearly feels like that's going to drive their lunch or breakfast business. So there's a lot of disruption in your category. How do you what's your lens at what you look at that disruption?
Yeah, so look, we can talk about disruption in terms of delivery or even disruption in terms of technology. We were among the last to have a meaningful loyalty program. And a lot of people say, well, why do you even need it? Everyone comes to you every day anyway. Because it's kind of table stakes in the industry. And the opportunity to do a trade with the guest that says, listen, if you want to give me your name and email and let me show you some new offers that may get you to buy some different things at different times, in exchange, I'll give you some great value for money and some free stuff. And so far, more than 7.5 million people have signed up for that in a matter of like a year.
In Canada?
In Canada.
Right. 18 million roughly adult population.
Right. So we have competitors that took years to get to half that rate.
Yeah.
And in less than a year, we had 7.5 million people sign up for the loyalty program. Then we said, okay, let's make this digital. Let's get it on the app, which we've just launched. So now we say, look, every time you visit us, you're going to get 10 points. And now you can bank those points and decide what you want to spend them on. So 5 visits gets you a free donut. 7 visits gets you a free coffee. 14 visits gets you a free ice cap. In fact, it opens up the entire menu. That's what folks expect from us. And in return, we're going to say, look, we're going to bring out some new products. And based on what you tend to buy every week, we're not going to spam you. We're not going to send you stuff you don't care about. But if you're an avid tea drinker and we're launching a new tea, I want to let you know.
Right.
If you've never bought a tea before and you don't care about tea, I'm not going to bug you with that. But we may have an amazing new lunch sandwich you should know about. So the loyalty program offers a ton of incrementality for us. Drive-through, we are digitizing our menu boards and all of our drive-throughs this year. Again, that gives not only the opportunity to segment our marketing message by region. We put in weather-based messages.
Sure.
So if it's the middle of the summertime, it's been cold and freezing and raining for 2 weeks, maybe we're not advertising our iced coffee. Maybe we're advertising a tea or a coffee or a hot chocolate, which some people want. And that can be adjusted region by region. Also, as we kind of roll forward a year or two, if you come to us 4 or 5 times a week and always order the same thing, toasted raisin cinnamon bagel with cream cheese and a large coffee with 2 cream, my order, then we'll be able to make it so you can turn on kind of automatic ordering on your phone. Then you use, whether it's NFC or some other technology.
Sure.
As soon as you pull in and you've opted into this, the digital menu board says regular order, got it, and you just pull straight through, and it speeds up your time and
everybody wins.
And our lanes. So we're embracing technology at every part of the business.
So product innovation, technology innovation in the way you hire people. You must hire thousands of people on almost a daily basis.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for people in your space or any executive about dealing with that pace of change? Because it's not, both scope and scale wise, the pace of change is just accelerating. How do you deal with that change?
There's always a friction in change, and you have to figure out how much friction the organization can handle before you crack it. I think most senior executives would go as fast as they possibly could 100% of the time. Most organizations have a hard time changing at that pace. So it's your job to figure out, number one, I've never seen an individual be able to drive change. You have to share your change vision, your leadership vision with a lot of people in the organization. So if the organization starts acting in the way you want them to, then the organization will drive the change. You can't just stand up and give speeches and expect stuff to happen. Like, you have to actually change all the way through layers. People have to be able to embrace the change and also in a constructive way push back against it. Like, a healthy culture has someone say, look, I know you want to go fast, I know you want to do this thing, I've been here for a long time, here are some pitfalls you should consider. And good leadership teams should stop and listen to those pushbacks. That's what an ownership culture is.
So you build mechanisms within the organization to get that kind of feedback from, the pace is
100%.
What's the Goldilocks pace, right?
And once you allow for that feedback and you take the feedback, you also need a culture of getting stuff done.
Yeah.
And if there's people in the organization that are blocking change, they need to be given the opportunity to get on board, or they need to go. I mean, people have to be put into roles to drive and deliver the change. So I can't answer it particularly for any particular company or industry. You have to be, kind of drive relentless discomfort to get things done.
Right.
And sometimes instead of kind of gearing up, you might need to coast for a few weeks to let things settle in, and then pop it back into gear and go again.
So, last question: what's next for RBI? What's the future? You've talked about the number of restaurants and pace and the adoption, technology, and better service. What's on the roadmap for the next couple of years?
So Burger King, it's continued to grow aggressively globally all around the world. So last year, in fact, the last 2 years, Burger King has done like net 1,000 restaurant growth each year. That was like a dream back in 2011, 2012 to ever be able to hit 1,000 new restaurants a year. So there are so many markets where we're still the number 2 brand with a huge opportunity to grow. For Popeyes, number one, it's harnessing this moment in time when everyone in the U.S. Has fallen in love with the chicken sandwich.
Definitely have momentum, right? You have momentum in that, right?
Right. So then you say, okay, great. I need to take that momentum. I need to rapidly expand in the U.S. I need to upgrade the image of the restaurants, but also globally. So look, now that we know that we've always had amazing chicken at Popeye. Now we've added the sandwich in as part of the arsenal. Our top competitor has built more than 11,000 restaurants in Asia. We have like 200. So there's a market in Asia that loves chicken, and we think we have better chicken than anybody, and we only have 200 restaurants open. So find partners and open as aggressively as we possibly can. And for Tim's, it's let's get the Canadian business, which is the large majority of the business, let's get our basics buttoned down. Let's do that phenomenally well. And then let's hit the gas and continue to kind of grow and make Canadians proud of us.
And it's probably the same opportunity in Asia. I remember looking at one of the restaurants that was open in Shanghai, right? So some expansion, big coffee drinking and tea drinking in Asia.
I totally agree. And look, and we're in the process of building out 1,500 restaurants in Asia, and we're in 7 or 8 or more different countries right now. And those are all important continued expansions. At the end of the day, everyone in the world says, how's home market doing? Right. We need to make home market amazing.
Very good. Well, Duncan, thanks for taking some of your time and chatting with the Voice of Retail. It's great to see you again.
Good to see you again.
Great chat. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Carl, welcome back to the Voice of Retail podcast. It's been way too long since we've seen each other. It's great to chat. I look forward to seeing you again sometime soon, but again, really great to chat. For the benefit of those listeners who may have not heard our earlier conversations and know not as much about you as I do, could you give us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Well, my name is Carl Boutet. I'm founder and chief strategist of Studio RX, which is a boutique retail strategy advisory firm that what basically got me to this is having spent the better part of a decade doing store-in-store technology specific retailing for Costco wholesale, and then having worked almost over 6 years with a large retail co-op that had just about 800 stores within it, and then since then, spending the last 5+ years working with technology companies, retailers, and basically the whole ecosystem that comes into contact with our global retail village. I'm based in Montreal. I've been here, I guess, since day one. But I travel extensively, or I was traveling extensively, like many of us, getting to the four corners. But now Montreal, spending a lot more time in Montreal, obviously.
Well, that's a great segue into my next question. I was with Steve Dennis in New York at the big show, the NRF Big Show in January, and we were both kind of missing you and commenting that it was a strange show not to have you there. And I believe, though, speaking of traveling, you were in China in January, and kind of pre-COVID China, I guess. Tell us about that. What brought you there, and what were your observations about China and the retail scene as a person right on the ground in China?
Right. So it was actually not just China. I was the primary purpose of that trip was actually I was chairing chairing the Southeast Asian Retail Summit, or the ASEAN Retail Summit, as they call it, that was based in Bangkok. And so the primary purpose of the trip was that. But I was fortunate enough to have travel plans that brought me through Shanghai, and they have or had a travel visa option that would allow me to spend nearly a week in Shanghai, without having to go through too much rigmarole of getting an actual formal business visa. So I benefited from that option and spent nearly 5 days in China, in Shanghai, I should say specifically, pre-COVID, definitely in terms of our knowledge when I was in Shanghai, there was zero concern around it, or didn't seem to be any level of alertness. We'd just basically been told to avoid Wuhan if we could. Even that wasn't so formal. It was more, a recommendation. But it was crazy to think, look back now and think of myself flying out of the airport in Shanghai on January 16th, sort of oblivious to all that was coming, but having really immersed myself for that period in the Shanghai retail ecosystem, which doesn't necessarily represent all of China, but is sort of the bleeding edge, just like saying New York City represents the U.S. retail scene. but even more so because Shanghai is just, I mean, what Shanghai was really at that specific period preparing for much more than COVID was their New Year's, their Lunar New Year, which is a huge event, as we all know there. So retail was, fully operating on getting everybody ramped up for Lunar New Year. And it was, astounding to see how that manifested itself in the consumption and just thinking about, I mean, I've been to the House of Innovation in New York, Nike's House of Innovation, and to think that they can actually, do something bigger and more impressive than that is hard to fathom. While they've done it in Shanghai. So that just kind of gives you a benchmark. And then think of, then the next level down is probably the best other Nike store you've ever thought of. And then they have those on pretty much every corner of Nanjing Road. So, I mean, it's just staggering. It's, and the volume and all the factors we know of were there, the consumption, everything to make that a reality. So that was sort of my pre-COVID experience in Shanghai, but my during COVID, which we could, I think, still characterize, and we'll talk more about the bounce back later, but is just the fact that I was really in contact with a ton of business people, in Shanghai. They really exposed me and helped me create relationships with people like the president of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai, who I'm pretty much still in daily contact with now. Different business leaders from one of the oldest retail marketing agencies there, and to one of the largest architecture firms as well, and store design firms. So I just this great sort of cross section of business people that I've been able to stay close with and understand how they've been dealing or made their way through this, or in the process of trying to get back on track.
I was speaking with Frank Lavin for the podcast, and we talked about how the experience, COVID experience, retail experience in China is basically a little bit like a crystal ball for what we might be able to expect around the rest of the world. So what were their, how did they get through it? What were their observations?
Yeah.
How did, and just talking to these folks on a day-to-day basis. And I guess, there's just starting, I'm not sure it's rebooting, but they're just starting to come out of it, 3-4 months later as we might as well. So it's such valuable learning. What are you hearing? What are they,
so
what were their experiences?
I think we need to be careful with the crystal ball analogy, because I think the realities, the ecosystems, the way their economy is built, differs quite a bit from ours. So we need to be still a bit careful as to trying to correlate how they're doing to how we will be doing. That said, I think it can inspire us a lot, though. I think there's some actions that they've taken that should, and we're already seeing some examples of that, sort of really inspire, I guess, how we can bounce back from that, or at least mitigate some of it. So let me start by saying some of the things I think will be more difficult for us short term to replicate is what's allowed them to get back on track a little more quickly is just the discipline they had around lockdown. I mean, they truly went into a complete, an utter lockdown, which is incredible for us to even think of when you see when I look back at the masses of people circulating around, that went from, went straight down to zero overnight, basically. So that's the first thing. So that's one's hard to replicate. And then secondly is the tracking that they have in place around, being able to show, be able to demonstrate where they're at in their health. So the big thing right now that they've had is these QR codes that they have to by law go around with, showing if they're contaminated, if they've been in contact with somebody that's contaminated, that's caught and all. So it's basically like a green, yellow, red thing where you basically, if you don't have a green if you don't have a green QR code with you showing that you're all clear, you're not allowed to get around. So you basically are in quarantine.
Wow.
If you're a yellow, you basically got to get checked, and it's in a red is confirmed case. So so these are all things that I know there was a lot of people looking into and seeing how we could develop something similar without too much infringement on our privacy, which is sort of what I'm getting at in terms of the big difference.
Yeah.
We all are know about and hear constantly about, but there are I know a lot of academics right now that are trying to develop systems, that decentralized sort of systems that could allow us to track this without necessarily exposing people's privacy. So that's a whole other subject that's well beyond retail, but it does accelerate and is part of the conditions of how they're getting back on track. And what I'm hearing is office work is back to, depending on who you listen to, but let's average it out around 75%, in some cases 95%. Manufacturing is back as well in that range. So there were interesting studies yesterday coming out from Fung Business Intelligence that tracks the Purchase Managers Index there for China, showing a really inspiring bounce back where it was catastrophic in February, and March is up substantially. So that would be something that could inspire us, but knowing that the factors that are leading to that are a bit different. Really, this is sort of one of the biggest cases right now for especially in the data science world, trying to find ways to tackle both the privacy and the health at the same time, and finding new solutions that we would be more comfortable with. So let's hope those come along quickly.
Kind of square that circle of something that both helps us all stay safe but keeps our privacy, maybe a hashed out kind of ID or something.
Well, so the distributed ledger technology is the one that it's quickly going to and using different pieces of machine learning and throw all the buzzwords in, but there is actual science behind that. MIT is actually instigating a really fascinating project around that, and we have some professors here in Montreal that are actively involved as well. But so I mean that's sort of the baseline of how they've managed to get back on track in places like Singapore and South Korea. Always knowing that there also is concerns around a second wave and all this other stuff that the media keeps reminding of us of. But they have this as a baseline, and we'll see. I mean, we're not the only ones facing this health and privacy paradox. I mean, the European Union is working hard on this as well, and all different parts of the world are really trying to lead the way here. So maybe a nice place for technology to play a very positive role in how we can get back to business. Well, speaking of getting back to business, based on your conversations with people in Shanghai and just on your great experience, what advice would you have for retailers listening about how and what to do today? I guess there's a couple of different broad classifications of retails today. Those who are deemed essential and operating, those who are not, and trying to muddle through or amplify their e-commerce. Like what advice now? And I guess it's almost, what advice do you have today? And then how do you advise getting ready for what is the next day, the coming out of all this and in the weeks and months ahead? How are you thinking about that, and what advice? Well, I mean, I think the first thing is business as usual, as we know, is over. I mean, that's been, that keeps on coming back, and it's very scary for some, but it's also a huge opportunity for many. I think it speaks to how we prepare and how we think about resilience now and sustainability beyond just the environmental and thinking about economic and social factors as well. But right now, let's say getting a little more practical, and what can I do today to think about let's focus on the non-essential, because I think they're the ones that need the most support in these circumstances, because the essential, as we all know, that the challenge is really logistical right now, and that's operations. It's operations, supply chain, all that good stuff, which I'm involved with as well on the other side. But I think that conversation is already well on its way, and we can see the actors playing there already, especially in the Canadian ecosystem. The ones that I think who are struggling more to sort of reframe this as an opportunity are the non-essentials, and we're almost scared to use the word experience right now, because that was sort of of our, that was our thing for the last decade. It was all about the experience, and now we're like screw experience. I mean, we need to get product out, right? I mean, like we need cash in bank. So unless you can tell me directly how I tie experience to cash in bank, I don't want to hear about it. But going back to sort of the influences that we've seen in Asia, I mean, we've seen sort of some of the ways that they've pivoted very quickly to more virtual, but still high experience and technologies. And the one that keeps coming up, and there was another great report this morning around, the live streaming piece that went up 700% in China over, which was already a pretty high adoption to begin with. So what is it going to take for us, here to start looking at this as beyond a shopping channel and really, seeing for who are going to be the retailers that are going to champion this as a way of engaging with their customers and finding new ways? Because Michael, I mean, you and I, we both know that people are going to get tired of shopping just for groceries online. I mean, they're going to eventually want to be a little more inspired, and yes, they're going to cut down. They're really going to cut down on their consumption around non-essentials. But the discretionary piece is really what's going to get hammered.
Birthdays still happen, right? Anniversaries still happen. Birthdays still happen. And I'm convinced. Hey, I'm tired of seeing you in the same shirt. For God's sakes, would you go buy a new shirt? We've been stuck here together. My wife and I were joking about that. It's like,
absolutely, yeah. No, even our
head. Could you buy a new shirt?
Our head of public health here in Quebec has become a bit of a superstar, who's always got some pretty flamboyant dressing on. I said the same things. I still need to get my new my funky ties and the shirts that I like, to make them so they stand out. But no, I think more than that, I think we're going to realize that shopping is in some ways is therapeutic for some categories and specific to certain people in different ways. And what might be therapeutic to me might not be therapeutic to you. But I mean, that's all good, because it creates opportunities for all the categories to do and create and drive content that's going to engage with me when I want to sort of get out of my funk. And I do want to shop for a colorful new piece of clothing, or a fragrance, or a piece of furniture that's going to brighten up. So all these things that I have a lot more time to look for and probably than I did in the past. The concern being around, sure, I'm going to be very careful how I spend my money, and knowing that not everybody's in different situations regarding that, and we got to be very sensitive to that. But it's going to create winners. I mean, it's going to create people out there, and we're seeing it. And I'm sorry to sort of always rehash some of the same examples, but when you're seeing sporting wear companies opening up free platforms for exercise, saying our premium service is now free. Cosmetic companies doing all sorts of really interesting things as well, trying to leverage these channels. And the one channel, like I said, I started off by saying, I think live streaming is something that if people haven't looked into it, is for me, a low hanging fruit, because it doesn't require that much, tech savvy. It just requires somebody that's comfortable to speak about a product that they're passionate about, which I would certainly hope that any retailer out there that's worthy of continuing in this environment is passionate about what they sell and how they sell it.
It's almost like, to borrow a phrase from China, a great leap forward potentially in things like that. The live streaming, and it's such a fascinating time, because the technology exists. It's just adoption, right? What kind of shock changes consumer behavior? Well, this is about as big a shock.
Yeah,
as I think our generation
the nice thing right now is the community is rallying together, the technology community, trying to make this. I mean, they recognize the opportunity, as the old saying, "Don't waste a good crisis." I mean, they're recognizing the opportunity to maybe change behaviors and are probably in getting attention. And there's a lot of really good Canadian technology providers in this space that are offering free service that would have been unheard of 3 months ago. Saying, right, okay, listen, right, we'll let you take this for a spin, at no charge, just so you can feel it out. Which they wouldn't have even fathomed a couple of months ago. It's not. It's opportunistic, but at the same time, I think it's generous. And there's plenty of examples of technologies like that. Maybe another solution too, that just so quickly to think about, because I'm seeing retailers and brands reaching out and trying to understand more around how they can engage the Chinese shopper. If the Chinese shopper is going to be back online more quickly than the North American shopper, maybe it's time I look into opening that Tmall store, that I've been hearing so much about as an example. So to offset some of those revenues, and the logistics are probably more straightforward going that way right now than the other way around. So, and Michael, I mean, if they're not doing it now, when are they going to do it? These retailers, if you're not taking this opportunity now to at least explore these a little more seriously and have the conversations and reach out to the partners and find out how difficult would it be for me to sell my clothing line in a Tmall. I mean, I saw this week the Hermitage opened its Tmall store. So you're starting to see things like that. We saw, and I did an interview with the president of the Chamber of Commerce, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. He shared a ton of great examples on that interview about different ways that businesses had been adapting, starting with the Chinese ones, going outside of China, trying to figure it out. Now it's maybe an opportunity for us to do the opposite.
If not now, when? I guess if I'd summarize all that, it's such great observations. And Carl, thanks for bringing such great background observations. Always a treat to speak with you, no matter the circumstances, but particularly today with your unique intersection of technology and retail, and having been there, and such a great observer and resource for retailers. How, if retailers who are listening want to get in touch with you, chat perhaps a bit more about this, or learn more about you, how do they get in touch with you?
I'm pretty easy to find, Michael, as are you. So I think they're maybe probably using the same tools. Carl with his C, Boutet, B as in Bravo, Outet. You can pretty much find me on all the platforms, Google me or whatever, LinkedIn, obviously. So I'll leave it at that. I think people that want to find me, pretty much, I'm pretty easy to reach out to.
Carl, once again, thanks so much for making time to chat with the Voice of Retail today. Look forward to catching up as we come back to you and get you back on the podcast in the months to come, and as we continue to assess. So once again, thanks for joining me, and have a safe week and weekend for you and your family.
Likewise, Michael. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks to Duncan and Carl for being my guests on this episode. Speaking of doing business in China, I'm thrilled to announce that in partnership with some of the top thought leaders in the space, I've launched a new podcast, Global E-Commerce Tech Talks. Be sure and check out our trailer episode, now available on all the major platforms, to learn more. Now, let's take a look at the top retail stories with our Retail This Week for the week of April 6th, 2020. Of course, COVID stories in retail dominate for all the good and bad reasons that we know. Great story here from Jake from the Financial Post. Jake, spot on taking a look at all hands on deck. Grocery store executives get a taste of the hard life on the coronavirus front line. So, there's Anthony Longo, there's folks, and Angie Kim from Loblaw, just working in the stores. The call went out to the head office that the help was needed in the stores. You get a first-hand view. I've been in a couple of recent as today, a couple of grocery stores today doing some shopping, and really congratulations to everyone on the front lines. They're doing a fantastic job. Not an easy thing to be doing and working in, but they're doing a great job managing the people in there. I was in my local Longos that had one-way directions on the floors. Not everybody's had figured that out quite yet. Kind of like you look up and you see someone coming at you at the highway the wrong way. But consumers will figure this out. Anyway, that's from Jake from the Financial Post. Retailers in Canada step up to help, and that's from Retail Insider. Kind of an good overall view here. In fact, there's an interview with a bunch of people. Trent Tam from Chief Marketing Officer for Harry Rosen, who I know well and had the pleasure of hosting Trent on the podcast, actually, from panels and from one-to-ones and marketing. So they're doing some great work from Harry Rosen, converting some of the shirt manufacturing into mask manufacturing. Great news for our Ontario retail cannabis. So we had another bump on the road last week when cannabis was declared non-essential, and that closed its doors. But in and all of that, we were pretty convinced that you could do curbside. There's some background legislation that didn't allow you to cross the product across the threshold. But kudos to the industry, kudos to a retail council who put their weight behind it to open that up and allow curbside delivery and home delivery with with the associates delivering, not by third party, but delivering directly, just like I got my steam whistle beer in here in Toronto delivered to my doorstep, much to the envy of my neighbors this week. So listen, whatever you think of the retail cannabis industry, I love it. I think it is a fantastic industry with great retailers, really top-tier retailers operating in that space. It must be said that when you close those doors, the black market slips right in. Immediately, there's already stores opening. There's no black market for printer ink or desktops or other tables, but disallowing curbside was certainly going to be catastrophic. And kudos to the Ontario government for recognizing that and for passing the legislation. So that's as of today, they're back and working, serving customers in the province. From the Globe and Mail, restaurants close, demand for grocery surges, food distributors shift their focus. So I've been talking about and talking about there's lots of food in this country, but it's not always in the right format. So there's lots of things going on, even with the CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, relaxing labeling requirements. Still food is very safe. It's just not configured the right way for consumers. So everyone is pulling together to make sure all that food gets onto the shelves, and certainly at a minimum we don't include waste at this time, but optimally just both the transportation, the trucks, the supply chains of the business to business food service business align up. And this is a great story from the Globe and Mail. Speaking of Ontario Premier Doug Ford, in a fun video, do check it out, designates the Easter Bunny's work as essential service in this province. So congratulations to the Ontario government for recognizing the important role that the Easter Bunny plays this weekend and declaring it, him or her, an essential service. So congratulations on that. Let's see, from an international perspective, listen, there's not a lot of good news. Neiman Marcus may seek bankruptcy protection. We've talked about Neiman Marcus before. It's a beautiful store at Hudson Yards, but they have been up against a tremendous amount of debt, and now this might be one of those things that pushes them over. Nordstrom as well, warning financial situation could become distressed. I think that's code for we could be in big, big trouble. That from CNBC, the other one from CBC. We've been talking about China a lot in this episode. China live stream sales, how brands continue to reach customers. So lots of, listen, there is lots of lessons to be learned. According to Taobao, there were 400 million users watching 60,000 plus live stream shopping shows. And they're hosted by influencers generating 200 billion won, 28 billion of sales. So just pay, something important to pay attention to what's been happening there. As I said, as I described in my interview with Carl, it's a great leap forward in many of these things. And I think, when we come out the other end of this COVID crisis, there'll be some lessons learned and some patterns changed in terms of how consumers shop. Some things remain the same. I believe stores will be back. People pent up demand to just shop in a normal environment, and we're a ways away from it. But there's all kinds of different things that are going to happen, and some things will stay the same, and some things will just be advanced 5 years basically from where they were, where we began. It just seems like a long time ago, but it was only 6 weeks ago. Speaking of changes, looks like Amazon's going to push out Prime Day at least until August. I think Amazon is struggling as many, from a logistics perspective, just get product out the door. I know my Amazon orders are not all next day. I think they're prioritizing the right things, but it is a massive undertaking. A lot of people turned to Amazon, so I think it's probably the right idea. Move it out from July until at least August. But that does raise the question as it starts to approach the fall, and it starts to kind of bump up against Black Friday. That'll be interesting. What else? Let's see, from an indie perspective, the great article here on some folks who've been on from Poppy Barley, actually. Justine Barbery's been on my podcast before, from the great shoe company, footwear company out in the West in Calgary. And the sales just fell off a cliff. So it's a study in survival. This is from the Financial Post, so it's a good read. Their sales plunged 90%, 90%. So they just talk about how they're going to rebound. And as Frank Lavin said in my last episode, bad weather, you got to move. Weather's bad, so they're putting plans together. And of course, we wish them nothing but all the best luck. What else? Other businesses, something kind of saying the obvious here. This from Alberta University of Alberta, the Kyle Murray, who is their University of Alberta retail expert, talking about some will do better than others. There's a big role for government to step in. I guess that is self-evident. In the strategy section, Stats Canada released a flash pulse this week, actually quietly on the 8th. I came across it, and it's really interesting. They do some statistics about product demand. Nothing really surprising. I mean, I guess it is kind of surprising to see a 630+% increase in hand sanitizer, just to put a number to it. But lots of other increases that primarily in the food industry. So, check that out. What else? We've got from the Winnipeg Free Press, pandemic is refining the food industry. I think so many things that we're going to be learning now and in the future about how people are buying and how differently they're going to buy. Lockdown, a couple of articles here about lockdown lifted in Wuhan. So this is, 76 days that they were locked down pretty hard. And as Carl said, these green codes that are the codes on their phone generated by Alibaba and Tencent, based on travel history, basic information, close contacts. So this is so interesting. Just visiting a shopping mall where a virus case is later confirmed could turn the code yellow. It's so fascinating and really fundamental to understand how they're coming out of it in 76 days, not 90 days. And as Carl said, this is not exactly a crystal ball. We're just not set up the same way, though I imagine we'll get closer than we'd like to having to do that. And then there's a couple of other articles. This is from New York Times. China ends the lockdown, but normal life is a distant dream. So again, saying that just because it's been 76 days, they're not going from complete lockdown to complete freedom. So something to keep our collective eyes on as we all kind of start to think about the future as COVID, or whatever post-COVID retail looks like. I was on a live webinar. I was working with Enterprise Ireland this week, great clients at Enterprise Ireland, and put on a webinar about the state of retail in North America. And one of the follow-up questions from the audience was, when do I think this is all going to end from an economic perspective? How long could it last? I said, well, I'm not an economist. I play one on an Enterprise Ireland webinar. And I said, the key driver is whenever there is, whenever there's not a cure, but whenever there's a vaccine. Because it's hard to imagine life as we knew it before, getting together and, for example, with 100,000 people to watch a Notre Dame football game without a vaccine. And that could be, let's say, the sharpest minds in the world are working hard on this. That could be, let's say they have a vaccine January 1, 2021, approved, safe, you don't want to cause more harm than good. Then you got to make 8 billion units of it, or at least 4 billion units of it, to inoculate half the planet, if not the entire planet. So, we're in this for a while, whatever that means. I don't think it's always going to look like this, but it'll be business as unusual, as I've been saying for quite a while. Well, that's a wrap on this edition of The Voice of Retail. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe on Apple iTunes, your favorite podcast platform. Please rate and review. Be sure to recommend to a friend or a colleague in the retail industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of ME LeBlanc Company, Inc. You can learn more about me on www.meleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a safe week.